So it is my affirmation that Donald Trump has decided 2 young Americans are going to get jobs. He is focused on creating so many jobs that he is keeping the news going for us. He said one Greenland episode was not enough. I'm going to give these young lads a part 2. We talked about Greenland for 45 minutes. Apparently that wasn't enough because since then, we have now threatened to militarily take Greenland. We have backed off of threatening to militarily take Greenland. We have threatened to put tariffs. We have backed off of those tariffs. Now we're making deals with NATO. He is out there looking out for my best interests.
I mean, he never really threatened military action. He just didn't rule it out.
Fair. I mean, semantics,
Didn't
but fair.
Rule it out, right? That's not a confirmed nor denied that it would happen. It just he didn't rule it out.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Here's what I found interesting. Did you watch his? I forget. I didn't watch the full speech of Davos, but I watched part of it, and he had said something along the lines. I'm going to quote this wrong. He said, "You can basically." The NATO alliance has not been beneficial to the United States. We've kept Europe safe from the big boogeyman that is the Soviet Union for 80 years, and then, for 60 years, and then Russia for 20 years, 30 years. And he said, you can basically give us Greenland and we'll be appreciative, or you can say no and we'll remember. And I don't hate that. Listen, I've been a fan of this whole NATO thing. When he was in his first term talking about backing out of NATO and that sort of thing, I was completely against it. I still, for the most part, am. But the more I've sat and thought on it, and the more I've seen, there is something to be said about the fact that the relationship for NATO has been very one-sided in favor of Europe.
Yeah. So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, this is the quote that I had to write this down. He was talking about this at Davos. He's talking about how lopsided NATO has been. And this is his quote. Since the 1980s, the U.S. has spent $22 trillion more on defense than Europe. That's 2/3 of our outstanding debt. So since the 1980s, the United States has spent $22 trillion more on defense than Europe. Who's benefited from that?
Yeah. I mean, the argument that Trump's camp has that NATO is not paying their fair share and it's not beneficial to us isn't without some truth behind it.
Yeah.
What has NATO really done for the United States at the end of the day? Sure, it's been a deterrent, and one of the big things people will point to is, oh well, the Europeans helped us out in the war on terror.
We're the only country to ever use Article 5.
Which
okay.
That's not to downplay what they did.
They let us use their military bases. Well, sure, they sent some people over, some special forces, obviously, and some Europeans died. I get that, but at the end of the day, their biggest contribution was allowing us to use their infrastructure for movement, for logistics. That's in the grand scheme of things. That was the biggest thing they contributed was, a supply chain. To be honest.
Well, and for the most part, I mean, think about it. The vast majority of NATO countries probably didn't even contribute ground forces. I mean, sure, the big one that everyone's talking about right now is the Danes helped. We know the British helped. The French sent some people. The Germans sent some people and stuff. But it's like, did the Czech Republic send people? I don't know, maybe. But you get what I'm saying. It's like, even that, okay, does that equal out? Let's be real. The United States did not need the Europeans in that.
Or was it? Kosovo. I'm pretty sure that was quite lopsided, and that was in Europe, right? It was the United States doing a lot of the intelligence gatherings. A lot of the military infrastructure was the United States. The same way with the Serbia Was it the Serbia bombings as well?
Off the top of my head, I forget. I'm not entirely sure of what you're speaking of, but continue.
Let's see. The Serbia conflicts, like, and I guess that is Kosovo, whatever you want to call it. The United States has always been the major player in including European conflicts since World War II.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is like not to downplay what the contributions the Europeans did in the war on terror, but does that make up for 90 years almost now, 80 years of us basically paying for their defense? I mean, we've spoken before about how Europe has all these good social programs they like to rub in our faces, but that's because we subsidize their military. So when Trump is saying, hey, you're not this has not been a beneficial deal for us, he's not entirely wrong. I mean, Europe has reaped the rewards of this relationship. That's why anytime the United States sits there and talks about, oh, we're going to go at we want to leave NATO, or we want to pass the NATO leadership to Germany, or we want to cut our contributions or something like that, they act like the world is falling down.
They're throwing a fit
because they know they can't do it. Like somebody pointed out, I commented a similar sentiment on a TikTok video recently, and somebody commented back, and they were like, and think about it. Think about how many European economies their military is being subsidized by the U.S., and they're still going broke. Look at Greece. They've been in turmoil forever. Spain, from my understanding, has not got the greatest economy in Europe, So it's like,
they throw.
Go on.
My biggest thing is they throw a fit. Look at Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. I mean, Trump kind of said, hey, you're no more free rides. And, critiquing the Canadians out there. You voted for him. You put him in office as a Trump card to Trump. Well, look at him. He's over in China making trade deals, saying openly that, there's a new world order. And coming back at and saying that after a trade deal made with them at a spite against Trump, you're kind of like, he's saying, oh, China's the new world leader, and the old U.S. led world order is out. It possibly is. It quite possibly is. But like, literally, you're doing that out of spite and throwing a fit.
Oh yeah.
Rather than going to the table and actually saying, okay, you know what, you're right. We have been getting quite the easy ride from you for the past history of Canada,
post World War
II. Post World War II. Instead of coming out and admitting it and saying, hey, look, what can we do to like have deeper ties, maybe economically, No, you're out of spite. You're going over to China, making trade deals, and saying they're the leader of the new world order. That seems kind of childish and spiteful to me, and ungrateful.
Oh, and I mean, let's be real. We have a childish and spiteful leader down here in the U.S. What is his response?
Our definition of childish today is, old school bullying, kind of get your way kind of thing.
I just mean, like, what is, Trump's going to respond. It's like he's not going to let that slide, and then you're going to act like the victim when he wants to impose tariffs on you for having trade deals with China.
Oh yeah, he threatened him today. He told him I forget what he said in a speech, but he's just like, he said Canada wouldn't be what it is today without the United States, and he's like, you might want to remember that and be grateful before you make those statements. And he's talking to Mark Carney, and he's just like, I think that's Trump's way of thinking. Yeah, let's see. Calling out Canada's Prime Minister Carney by name, Trump said on Wednesday, Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. I think we're seeing a perfect insight of what Trump's saying is like, hey, how about a little bit of respect?
Well, and how about, how about you guys actually contribute? Like, I'm not saying that the United States should own Greenland, to kind of tie this back to all that going on. No. But not to kind of tie this all back to what's going on with Greenland. I'm not saying that what Trump's kind of insinuating is like, oh, we should get Greenland as payment. But at the end of the day, it's like, the United States is on track to be $40 trillion in debt by the end of this year, if probably sooner. At,
Yeah.
at what point do we sit there and say, hey, a large chunk of that debt is for Europe? A large
Yeah.
chunk of
I
that
mean,
debt isn't even necessarily for NATO in Europe. I mean, look at Ukraine. At what
yeah.
point do we, hey, you guys have two options. You can start paying us back, or we can kind of go do our own thing. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at, obviously Trump wants Greenland for its resources and things like that, but there is he's not wrong when he says that it is vital to the U.S.'s defense. I looked it up. I think I was telling you this recently. I looked up how long it would take a Russian missile to get from Russia over the Arctic to the United States. Depending on the target in the United States, it can take as little as 15 minutes.
Yeah.
At most, for most of the
And
for other ones, it's
that
like
flight
35.
path, or I guess the flight path kind of directly goes over Greenland, or is right out of reach of Greenland, where if U.S. military assets are in Greenland, they can intercept.
Yeah, and northern Canada.
Yeah.
Because that's the other part. He wants to put defense platforms in Canada as well. I think he said something to that effect recently. It's he's not wrong on that either. I mean, if Russia launched several missiles over the Arctic at the U.S., I was looking it up. So I believe it's the first. It takes 2 to 3 minutes for them to from launch to like getting exo-atmospheric. That's like the only real window you have to shoot those down. You
Yes.
know, so you've got seconds.
That's when
to
it's going
react.
its slowest.
Yeah, you've
in all reality.
got seconds to react. Now you can still hit it when it's exo-atmospheric, but that takes a lot more effort and things of that nature. But again, that's
Yeah.
why we need
Yeah.
those.
Well, at that point, statistically, the risk is much higher, right?
You mean the risk of missing, or
Yeah, the risk of missing,
okay?
and ultimately detonation over American territory, right? If it's doing Mach 8, and I think we only have 40 intercontinental ballistic missile interceptors in the United States, and I believe 20 some of them are in Alaska.
Okay. Well, I know
We're talking land-based. We're talking land-based that can knock out, the Aegis system on ships and stuff. But again, Arctic Ocean, we don't have ships out in Arctic Ocean.
right.
Half of our interceptors are in Alaska. The other half, I believe, are in like California. And there's some deterrence, I guess, from like capabilities that we already have in Greenland. But for the most part, it's only a tracking system. So it's kind of like, okay, well, why not have the missiles next to the tracking system?
I mean, that would make sense. I mean, I'm no expert. But...
Greenland.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Canadians aren't going to stop us from building missile defense platforms in Canada. I'm sure the Danes are not going to. The Danes are not going to stop us from building missile defense platforms in Greenland. However, the broader thing I'm trying to get at, and maybe Trump's trying to get at too. Maybe I think he's trying to argue that Greenland should be given to the U.S. as payment. I'm not necessarily saying that, but at the same time, I think that something needs to change in this relationship that the U.S. has with NATO. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I've seen an acronym going around on social media recently for NATO. It says "needs America to operate," and that's not wrong. NATO is nothing without the U.S. And we don't need Europe. Europe needs us at the end of the day. Now, that's not to say we don't need allies and that they're not helpful and whatnot. But, I saw an interesting argument from somehow I've been ending up on British news TikTok. And there was this woman, I don't know British news. She could have been from Britain's version of Fox News. She could have been from Britain's version of CNN. Not sure. But she had made an interesting argument. She said, for 80 years, the United States has stationed troops in Europe. They station missiles in Europe. They station tanks in Europe, planes, all the things that you would need to defend Europe. She said that we've been footing the bill for all that, the Americans. They've been footing the bill. They've been doing all this. They've never really hey, you give us this money back. You need to do X, Y, and Z. She made a good argument, though. She said, imagine the outrage that would come from European nations if America said tomorrow, hey, NATO, we need you to actually, Britain, we need you to put a base in Arlington, Texas, and you need to staff it with your soldiers, and you need to pay for it, and you need to have your vehicles on it and everything, and you're going to help us with defense from immigration from the southern border. She goes, we would look at them and say they're absolutely crazy. That's on the other side of the world. That doesn't affect us. I don't care if we're allies. That's not a big problem that the British taxpayer should be worried about. So why is it acceptable when the roles are reversed and the U.S. taxpayer has to pay for Europe's defense and has to subsidize Europe's military and subsidize Europe's, all these social programs that they love to talk about and flaunt and act like they're so morally superior to us because we focus on education and we focus on healthcare. And it's like, yeah, you don't have to focus on the military because the American military is going to protect you at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, Soviet Union fell in 1991. Since that day, military spending across the European continent has fallen. And they're like, oh, the boogeyman is gone. And the U.S. stayed there. The U.S. stayed vigilant. We had an ever presence of U.S. troops there until the resurgence of aggressive Russia. And since then, they still haven't. They've increased it since, but not at the scale the United States has. They're just in the background. It's always been, well, at the end of the day, the United States will come and get us. They'll help us out. We'll have enough troops for civil incidents and what have you, but not enough to field a military strong enough to counter that of Russia, the boogeyman, right?
Well, I have two things. First, just a little fun fact. Did you know what the last country to leave the Soviet Union was when it fell? It was not Russia, as you would think. It was Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan was the last of the Soviet Union, funnily enough. Just a little fun fact. Weird little fun fact that the Soviet Union started in Russia and ended not in Russia. But fun fact too, to your point of Europe just having a small, basically contingent of soldiers for its own defense, I looked it up. We have at any time 80 to 100,000 soldiers stationed in Europe. Mostly in Germany, I believe. We've got multiple bases all around Europe, but mostly in Germany. The entire British armed forces numbers at about 160,000. So at any given time, we have over half of Britain's military stationed in Europe. Just, we're footing that bill.
We're footing the bill.
For so that they don't have to. I mean, hell, what was it, 2-3 years ago when they came out, and I think it was the CIA or Pentagon, one of those groups, sat there and said Britain's military could not defend the island if it was invaded. That if there was a hypothetical invasion of Britain, their military couldn't fend it off. It's like,
it's fallen in disrepair.
At what point are you mooching? It's like the equivalent of you giving me a ride to work every day, and I have a bicycle, and it's like, hey, don't worry, I'll take you to work for now until you get back up on your feet and you can, buy a new car. And you're having to drive out of your way every day to come pick me up. But you're a really good friend, so you're not too worried about it. Yeah, sure, it's an extra half an hour on your drive to work, an extra half hour on the way back. But you're a good friend. You're going to help take care of me until I get back up on my feet. And 20 years later, I still have refused to buy a car. I'm still only got a bicycle for my local to get groceries and stuff, to go to the post office, to do whatever. And you are still driving me to and from work. It's like, at what point do you sit there and go, hey, okay, you need to get a car, okay? I can't keep doing this. I've spent an extra hour 5 days a week picking you up and dropping you off, spent all this time and gas, you've never paid me, and you seem to have no motivation to go get your own car. I'm washing my hands of this.
Yeah.
It's like, at what point are you mooching off of us?
They know they're doing it. They know what they're doing as well.
Well, that's a crazy thing. I don't think the average European
citizen
the average
realizes. European, no.
I think like the European governments, absolutely. But I think the average European, because they wouldn't talk so much shit. Like, listen, I've said this before. Nothing will make me side with MAGA. I'm progressive. I am progressive left. Nothing will make me side with MAGA faster than Europeans talking shit and acting super superior to me because they have all the programs I want but can't have because I'm paying for their military.
And kind of to take this to American politics, do you see Gavin Newsom's over there?
That was another thing I wanted to get into at some point.
He's over there. He's watching the speeches. He's having interviews on CNN, of course, and saying, "Oh, the European countries should rally against Trump and fight him and this and that." Isn't that a crime to be kind of at a political event like that? Or, you know...
Well, I don't think it's a crime, but why is a governor there? Now, granted, to be fair... To be fair, that governor's state has more of an economic output than most European countries combined, but...
But not because of him.
No. But I mean, but that's like saying
like it is him doing it, dude. But since you took office in California, homelessness is on the rise. You have a negative debt.
But that's like saying, well, you know, I could make the argument, well, why is Trump there? I mean, America's economy is not because of just Trump. Like, you know, it's like
but he represents the United States.
Yeah, and that's kind of the main point is why is the governor there? Yeah, that's kind of the main point. Why is a governor there? Why are we not sending the governor of Rhode Island? You know,
Scott Bassett went after him today. He's just like, he's talking about Gavin Newsome, and he's like, he's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Well, and let's be real, he's just trying to fucking set himself up on a.
Dude, you're not gonna be president.
No. I think even the left is starting, like, from what I've seen is like the left likes that he's trolling Trump, but
Trump trolled him in his own speech at the event.
well, I mean, like the left likes that he's on Twitter, you know, he's talking like Trump does on Twitter and stuff. I mean, it's his fucking PR doing.
But he's not making any good points.
It's not him. But
are any of his points resonating with the American people like Trump's were?
Well, what I'm saying is that I've noticed that the left is even starting to realize like he's who he needs to be in whatever room he's talking to. You know, when he's talking to a group of wealthy white elites, he's suddenly this affluent, very well-educated person. When he's talking to a room of black people, he was suddenly outside growing up playing basketball and surviving off ramen noodles.
Yeah.
You know, when he's talking, and he never stands on any issue. Did you see recently he was on Ben Shapiro's podcast? I did not watch it, but I saw clips from it and stuff. And basically, anytime Ben Shapiro pushed back on him, he immediately folded. From the clips I saw. Now, again, this was not the entire interview, but like, for instance, I believe they were talking about ICE or something like that. I think it was ICE. And Newsom's Twitter account had put out something like ICE is a domestic terrorist organization or some shit like that. And Ben Shapiro's like, basically pushed back, and he was like, you know, but they're acting on the federal government. Like, we need border security. Don't you agree? And Gavin Newsom's like, yeah, that's not wrong. And he's like, and wouldn't you say like attacking officers is a crime and stuff? And he's just like hemming and hawing around every question Ben Shapiro asks because he doesn't want nailed down to any one point. He's not going to be. Yeah. He's trying to set up for a 2028 presidential run. He's not going to make it. I would imagine. Plus the progressive left really, like the mainstream media, the news entertainment ecosystem, you know, the leftist politicians and stuff, they like to try to portray Gavin Newsom as this like super progressive left guy. But I follow pages from all political spectrums. You've seen I've sent you libertarian things before, I've sent you progressive things before. The progressive left pages I follow, like the hard left ones, they fucking despise him. They do not like Gavin Newsom. They realize he is a snake in sheep's clothing. They realize he is not, he is a moderate Democrat running a very liberal state who portrays who he needs to be in the moment. The moment he gets on a debate stage, like let's say hypothetically he won the Democratic primary in 2028, the moment he wins that, he's going to start being the most centrist candidate you will have ever seen. To try to cater to the mainstream American public, which sure, maybe that's what you need to win. Absolutely. Get some consensus, get some compromise. But the main point is, like, he's going to say what he needs to say to win the Democratic primary, and then he's going to say what he needs to say to win the general election, and he's not going to stand on anything.
Yeah, and you know why he's there. He's there to be a counter to Trump in his own mind. At the end of the day, the only people giving him attention is probably, of all things, CNN. Don't trust a fucking thing you see on CNN.
Look, Democrats, this is what resistance is. This is how you fight fascism. You go to Davos and hang out with billionaires.
Yeah, you go to bought and paid for by Alex Soros. But yeah.
So actually, that actually ties into something I wanted to talk about for a long time. I don't think we've ever talked about. So this kind of goes into a much larger topic. So a few months back when we had all those issues with the Texas redistricting, you had, what was it, Prop 50 in California, where they were redistricting to counter Texas. That passed. They're working with all that right now. I think there's still issues with that with the Supreme Court and stuff. But regardless, at what point, like, governors are supposed to represent their state's interest. Like, that's at the end of the day, you're basically the president of your state.
Yeah.
When you are entering this, and this isn't just about Gavin Newsome, this is about politics in general. Texas is a great example. Indiana has been doing their thing. Maryland's been doing their thing. When you are actively, well, we're going to do this because Texas did it and we need to counter them. Well, now you're talking about national politics. Like, is that you? I guess what I'm getting at is, like, where does your role as governor end? Should you be considering that? Like, does national politics, should you be caring about that as governor? I mean, sure, if you're trying to set up for a presidential run, but in my mind, you really shouldn't be doing all that. Even at the end of the day, I think, like, realistically, what should have happened is, well, California, or, Governor Gavin Newsome, are you going to redistrict California to counter Texas? No. How does that benefit California? What are you talking about? That would just be disenfranchising Californian voters. At the end of the day, I'm the governor of California. Though, like, do I think Texas should be doing that? Absolutely not. But we're not going to also break the law and enter national politics just on some political woes and widen this political gap.
Yeah, that would be the politically mature thing to do, but we're post 2016 and
that's not a knock at just Gavin Newsome, for the record. I mean, that's every state.
Texas started it, of all things, because Trump told him to do it.
And I mean, at that point, I mean, you're moving from states' issues and what's best for the state and what's best for your state's voters to now, well, what's best for the party and what's best for the national party. I mean, if you're the governor of the state, and I mean, Democrats especially love to talk about, well, we're going to be look at Joe Biden. His thing was, I'm not going to be president for Democrats. I'm going to be president for Americans. And Democrats love to try to act like that. But at the end of the day, you're disenfranchising Californian voters. Granted, Texas is doing the exact same. But, I mean, from that point of view, okay, well, you're not being the governor for all Californians. Now it sounds like you're being the governor for Democrats and just Democrats, and you're willing to arguably break laws that, sure, Texas broke first, and now you're putting the interest of your party ahead of the interest of your state. That doesn't sound like something a governor should be doing.
Well, at the same time, I get what Republicans are they shouldn't have done it under Trump calling for it. But like, I seen this. I could be wrong on it. I seen it on social media X, but it's talking about the states that make up New England. 40% of their voting bloc is Republican, but they have zero representation. No senators, no Congress people. The same applies to California. I think 40 or 45% of the state actually voted Republican, but they have little to no representation.
Oh, well, that's a
how is that fair? How is that fair?
Well, that's a general problem in this country with gerrymandering.
Well, they say that about Republican states. They're like, oh, the black vote, the Hispanic vote, this and that. Okay, well, what about the conservative vote in your states?
Oh, I'm not defending gerrymandering. I think it's terrible. I think we need to outlaw it. I think we need to find ways around it.
The Republicans are fighting back and using your tactics. What a shame. You shouldn't have started it.
But my argument is still, if I'm the whatever the fucking Hot Wheels governor of Texas is, at the same time, at what point do you sit there and go, well, listen, that sucks if you live in New England, you're a conservative up there, but that doesn't affect me or Texans. I'm the governor of Texas.
Unfortunately, in American politics, there's no longer state representation. It's all about the national party, I think, at the end of the day. And that goes for Republicans and Democrats.
Again, that's why we need third parties.
Yeah, that's where, you used to hear about Texas Democrats, they lean, they have a lot of conservative values. They call themselves Democrats on certain issues, but at the end of the day, they were looking out for Texas. That's why they're very staunch in their beliefs and their morals, and they let that guide them. A state representation, a state culture, they let that guide them rather than following the party. You can't say a Texas Democrat. I mean, you can. I guess there are still Texas Democrats. They still lean kind of conservatives in some ways, but I think that's kind of quickly fading. Like,
the purple,
those state identities are going away.
The purple districts in the purple states are definitely becoming much more red or blue, depending on which shade of purple they were leading. You've lost the pro-life Democrats and the anti-gun Republicans.
Everything's become so polarized on the national level. That's why, to your point, I don't think they're not. I mean, sure, some issues are done by the state, but I don't think anymore they're really, in general, they're thinking about nationally and how they fit into everything rather than what's best for my state.
Yeah,
you have some governors who do it. Like I will say,
look at
the
Indiana.
Ohio governor.
Look
at the Ohio governor. He's pretty good. Ohio is a red state. However, they voted for recreational weed and protecting abortions.
Yeah, but they've got one of the most gerrymandered maps in the country. I believe
Very true.
I believe it's like a 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans, yet Republicans have gerrymandered the fuck out of it so much that good luck if you're a Democrat running literally anywhere in the state.
Yes. However, there have been multiple issues which the Ohio Congress has put forth to the governor, and he's vetoed them. Very conservative bills, and he's kind of knocked it down.
Wait till they get big boy Vivek Ramaswamy in there. Another guy that came out of absolutely nowhere and is suddenly important in politics.
A plant.
Yeah. looking at you, VP JD Vance. Congratulations on your fourth kid. If you ever listen to this.
Looking at you, Palantir.
But my thing is more just, and certain states have kind of drawn the line in the sand. I think Indiana has been the big one where their House Republicans had basically said, absolutely not. We are not gerrymandering our state. And I'm sure it's gerrymandered to an extent, but they were like, we're not getting involved in this little war of the states in Congress. I thought that was a bad idea to begin with, because when you looked at the map, if Democratic states had actually done it, like California and New York, and the Republicans stood to lose more than the Democrats did. I think it was something like, I watched a breakdown once, I think I told you about it. It was like, if every big Democratic state had kind of followed California's lead, the Democrats could have won 10 seats in the House. So I was curious why Trump even thought that was a good idea to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, how many more red states could have also gerrymandered?
Well,
Right?
yes, but the problem is most of those red states, I mean, they don't have as many House seats as the blue states do. When you look at red states, they're big states with small populations. Like, they have 2 or 3 House, positions. Or I don't know off the
Well,
top of my head, but like
so did that
Iowa
also
or
consider that, like, some states are, swing states, right? If they were to attempt to do something like that,
I'm not sure.
yeah, you know what I'm
But
saying? Like maybe that next election cycle, they might lose out big time.
yeah, yeah,
I would say there's a lot of moderates and independents in the Midwest,
agreed.
and
I mean,
more
to
so
your
than on
point,
any
Ohio.
coast. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm surprised that Ohio is gerrymandered the way it is, especially when it kind of votes kind of left on some issues, and maybe it's
From my understanding with
there could be a
Ohio,
future in which Democrats win Ohio again, right? You piss off a bunch of those independents, you might lose out.
well, from my understanding with Ohio was, I think it was like, I read a whole thing on it once. I want to say it dates back to like 2008 or 2012, something like that. Um, the Republicans got enough of a majority to actually do something, and it happened to fall around a redistricting year, and that's when they just went buck wild. And they drew themselves into a supermajority, and I believe they had like the Ohio Supreme Court as well. And it ended up being basically all the stars aligned perfectly for them. And
Well, sorry, Democrats.
yeah, and it was just like, hey, good luck ever getting Ohio back. And that's where I'm like, listen, this is a problem across the board. This is not just California. This is not just Texas. I think one of the other big issues is we've seen. I was watching something recently when they were talking about who's going to be the nominee for 2028 for the Democrats, and they said in all likelihood it's going to be a governor this time. You've seen a lot of over recent years senators really taking the main stage or former senators. You haven't really seen too many governors running, and they said the person was discussing, they were like, you're probably about to see that pendulum swing, and as such you've seen more governors doing more things to make names for themselves. Gavin Newsome is on every political podcast known to man and is the most conservative man in the country when he's talking to Ben Shapiro, or the most liberal person in the country when he's talking to CNN. You've seen Gretchen Whitmer's name thrown out there. You've seen Josh Shapiro's. You've seen Tim Walz, although I don't think he's running for shit in the future.
Yeah, I think his career is over.
Yeah, I think his political career is absolutely in the dumpster.
I like the idea of governors, working to become presidents. At the end of the day, who's got more experience running a large territory? A governor does, whether that's Democrat or Republican. At the end of the day, what are the senators doing or Congress people doing? Half the time, they're not even reading the bills they're voting on. What makes them capable and competent enough to run a country? At the end of the day, I'd like
every time a bill's passed, hey, why did you vote for this thing? This thing that says you want to, watch orphans starve to death isn't there. Oh, well, I didn't know that was in there. If I had known, I wouldn't have voted yes on it.
Yeah. Oops.
Look at every
people didn't tell me that was in the bill.
Look at every not to single out Republicans, but when they passed that big beautiful bill, every Republican that voted yes when they found out that provision in there was said basically no state can regulate anything to do with AI. Suddenly they were all like, well, if I'd known that was in there, I wouldn't have voted on it. Why were you voting on it if you didn't know what was in there?
It's your job. What do you mean?
You have one job. How did you fail
one job
so hard?
But, to my point, though, is like they can't even do that right. They can't read the bills that they're passing. They don't know what they're voting on. What makes them capable of running the United States of America, of all places? At the end of the day, whether it's not Gavin Newsome, fuck that guy, the next governor of California or the governor of Texas or, any kind of state, hey, I have merit to run on here. I ran a state government. These are my results. This is stuff that you can see that I've done for my state. I'd like to take this to the country. Okay, all right. This guy or girl has a proven track record. They can run it. They've done it, rather than a Kamala Harris who, what did she do before she was vice president?
Hide evidence to keep people in prison.
Really, I mean, think about it. What did she actually do before she was vice president? I can't even tell you. What was she, like a prosecutor or something?
She was the attorney general for California, and then she was the senator for California. And she came to fame when she
Where is the track record of running a fucking country or a state?
Her track record and her entire claim to fame was during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, basically looking into the camera and saying, "Fuck you, Brett Kavanaugh. I believe the victims here," which, fair. If you did believe that, fair, yeah. Absolutely. But if you watch the clips of her talking to the victims that were testifying, the alleged victims, I should say, that were testifying before Congress, you could tell she knew the cameras were on her. And her other big claim to fame is she's the only black woman in America.
Yeah. No. Some people, if we had a comment section and viewers that were, to the future viewers, I know you're probably going to bring up Donald Trump wasn't a state representative or a governor. I understand that. But at the same time, you can make the argument that a business and a country are kind of one and the same in terms of economics, even though the United States hasn't had a surplus in decades. But at the same time, he had a recognizable name for business, right? Think about New York 1980s, Donald Trump, 90s, Donald Trump. It was that persona, right? New York City, Donald Trump, they both went hand in hand, right? And I know he doesn't have a proven track record of running a lot of his businesses, but
lots
you could say there's lots of bankruptcies. But you could literally say, though, he understands the flows in and outs of a organization structure, right?
I see what you're saying. It's different to it's
I would
still
rather
a leadership
see the
role.
CEO. Yeah, I would rather see the CEO of NVIDIA, the world's most wealthiest company, get a presidency over, say, a Kamala Harris.
Well, it's
right?
It's a leadership.
That guy could say, "Hey," we could look at him and be like, "Yeah, like you said, a leadership." We could look at that guy and say, "What's your track record?" Oh, well, I started this little graphics card company in the 1990s, and now it's the world's most successful AI company and the most valuable corporation in human history. Okay. Well, understandable.
I mean, my point is, like, it's a leadership role at the end of the day versus where senators are more, they're still leaders to an extent, but not in the same vein. And their job is much more
modern American senators. If you can't read a bill that you're passing, I would say none of them are leaders.
Well, that's a fair assessment. But I mean, like they're more of a rubber stamp almost. I mean, at the end of the day, Congress like comes up with laws allegedly.
Allegedly.
But they basically just rubber stamp it to send to the president at the end of the day, and then the president decides, assuming it doesn't have a veto-proof majority. And even if the president does decide, from the sounds of it, I mean, they can sign the bill and just choose not to follow it. And I mean, look at Pam Bondi and the Epstein files. They could just sit there and say, you know what, Congress, you have no power here. I am immune to everything. We're not doing this.
Yeah, pretty much. And I guess there's more about that. A judge came out yesterday or today and kind of backed the Justice Department, saying there was real concern and releasing everything. And so, whatever. Deep state. Deep state.
I'm gonna call some bullshit. And first off, also, and even if that is accurate, that's not what the law says. The law doesn't say, well, if there's some the law's, hey, this needs released at this time without redactions, and that wasn't followed. Now, if you wanted to appeal it, cool, go for that. But I don't think they're appealing it. They're just saying, nope, Greenland,
Greenland,
ice,
look over here.
Minnesota, Somalians,
Yeah.
140,000 immigrants in Minnesota versus 2.3 million in Texas. Just saying.
In the news, check it out. But to everything that we were talking about is like we've mistaken for some reason we're no longer going with traditional leadership, and like you said, a lot of governors are kind of gearing back up to change that, and I kind of like that idea. Whether they're Democrat or Republican, it's people who we know have a track record, and we can look at that track record.
My only issue is that it ends up with people like Gavin Newsom. And
yeah,
well, not even just that. Like and
Ron DeSantis, but he is kind of actually doing good shit for his state. But whatever.
Well, I mean, to the point of like that Prop 50. You're more focused on making a name for yourself nationally than you are about doing good things for your state. I mean, let's be honest here. At the end of the day, California, Gavin Newsom, I think it was when what was it, a year or two ago, wasn't it? Xi Jinping came over to California to have a meeting with Trump, and Gavin Newsom, the hero of the poor and the downtrodden and the homeless, was basically having the homeless just move to other areas and cleaning it up so it didn't look like we had homeless people. Wasn't doing anything to help them. He was basically just relocating them to other areas and being like, good luck now. Don't come back until she's gone.
Yeah, look how pristine my state is. Oh, wow, look at these clean streets.
Meanwhile, I mean, at the end of the day, it's overplayed. I mean, it's not like California is overrun with fentanyl and homelessness, but it is a severe problem out there. And it's a severe problem that instead of focusing on how to fix that, you now have a governor who's more focused on how can I make myself look good and go do podcast tours and stuff so that I can try to run for president in the future.
Yeah.
That's my only fear.
Should you be running your state, dude?
That's my only fear is that now you're more focused about almost branding, name recognition.
That's where if we had other governors running against him, they can, look at my record, Gavin Newsom. Can you say that you did the same for California? Let's look at your track record and let's look at everything that's gone on in your state since you became governor. Let's talk about the increase in homelessness. Let's talk about the increase in drug uses. Let's talk about the flow of capital out of California because of your business policies. Let's look at the migration leaving California. That's kind of stuff that a counter to him, another governor could hypothetically do in that scenario.
I think the problem with that is just in the political environment we are in. The Democratic Party's entire personality right now is just anti-Trump. So you're not going to get a Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro on stage countering Gavin Newsom going, wait, how did you do with homelessness in your state? I decreased homelessness in my state while it increased under you or whatever. You'll still have that to an extent, but it's going to be more focused, I think. The next Democratic primary is going to be more focused on
signaling.
Well, it's going to be more focused on I was more anti-Trump than you were. I did more to resist tyranny and fascism than you did. Josh Shapiro is going to be talking about how he signed bombs that were getting dropped on Palestinian children. And Gavin Newsom's going to be talking about how he was in Davos being a counterweight to Trump.
Yeah,
it's literally just going to be. Instead of, in an ideal world, I think what you're getting at would be great, but I think it's going to be more, at least in the near future, I was more anti-Trump than you. That's why the Democrats should vote for me.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, I think governors are the better choice, whether Democrat or Republican, and unfortunately, it's more hyperfixating on virtue signaling. And like you said, being counter this person or counter that person, whereas they should be checking themselves. Another Democratic governor should be checking Gavin Newsom, saying, well, while you were out on the national stage or out on the international stage trying to be a counter to Trump, I was actually fixing issues within my state. Here's my track record. Here's you in Davos. You know,
fair.
doing
And I think that's also where you need in your own state. I mean, and the onus is kind of on Republican voters in California as well. A counter to him within his own state of a Republican challenger and a third party challenger. You know, I'm a big fan of third parties.
Yeah, but they always run the loonies on the right.
I swear
in California.
to God, it's not just in California. I mean, they always somehow, and Democrats have their own problems. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like we referenced Vivek Ramaswamy is running for Ohio governor. Does the dude even live in Ohio? Has he ever even set foot in the state? I'm not even
like you said, where the hell did he come from?
Yeah, it's like you're running the guy whose basically whole brand appeared in 2024 and no one had ever heard of him before. Now he's suddenly like the Indian Trump. And he literally, that was like his whole brand was, well, Trump's going to be arrested and he's not going to be allowed to run. So I'm going to be exactly like him. And that's why you should vote for me. I remember watching an interview with him where they were basically like, well, why should Republicans vote for you? And he's basically like, well, Trump's going to get arrested and can't run. So you should vote for me. And then Trump defied the odds. And Vivek became part of Doge for like a week, and then he's suddenly running for Ohio governor. And meanwhile, I don't think anybody in Ohio had ever heard of this guy 2 years ago.
To my fellow Republicans, especially, obviously, we live in Ohio. My Republicans in Ohio, don't vote for that guy. Clearly, he's a freaking plant.
Listen. As a progressive, he has one redeeming quality. I will say. He wants to get rid of property taxes. And I have for a very long time I have for a very long time been a very big proponent for property taxes. I have always liked them. I thought that they did really good. However, I've actually told you this recently. That was an issue I recently flipped on and think we should get rid of property taxes because.
All right. Well, to my Ohio Republicans, maybe this is our
find a Republican that will get rid of property taxes who isn't an industry plant and isn't part of the fucking billionaire fan club. They're about to get jackets made out here.
Going on.
Yeah, whatever fucking deep state bullshit he's part of.
Yeah.
To the point of, I will real quick get into this. Again, the whole purpose of this idea of a podcast is change people's opinions on things and broaden your horizons, escape the echo chamber, if you will. I have always been a big proponent for property taxes. I've told you this before. One of the best arguments I ever heard for property taxes and what made me really support them was, are you familiar with John Green? He's an author. He wrote Fault in Our Stars. Him and his brother, Hank Green, they do a bunch of stuff on YouTube and things like that. They have a bunch of science and history stuff. They're great. I'll have to send you some links to them. But he at one point talked about property taxes, and he said, the big thing about property taxes is oftentimes property taxes go to your local schools. They're tied heavily to education. And he's like, I happily pay property taxes and vote for increases to public education funding that are funded with property taxes because I like to live in an educated society. Even though I don't have children, I want to make sure these children are getting education. I don't want to be in a world. I don't want to be in a world ran by idiots, which is fair. Absolutely fair.
Absolutely fair.
That was my North Star on the subject for a very long time. And I was literally driving home one day thinking about, I don't know why, I was thinking about property taxes, but I was. And the progressive in me was thinking about it. And I realized, hypothetically, I have a mortgage, I'm paying on my house and everything. But hypothetically, if I fucking won the lottery tomorrow and paid off my house, I still have to, if I wanted to go completely off grid, get some fucking goats and chickens and grow my own food and never have to, be completely self-reliant, I still have to come up with enough money every year somehow to pay the government my property taxes, or they're going to show up with sheriffs and take my home. And I realized property taxes keep you a wage slave. You have to always have at least enough income to pay the government, because they're basically holding you at gunpoint, saying, we will take your house that you worked really hard to pay for, and if you don't, you're going to go to jail, you'll be homeless, all that. So with property taxes, to circle that back, you have to always have some sort of income. And I don't like that. I do not like that. I think that if you want to go live off...
counter that, you could live off a social program and possibly have quite a bit of your expenses paid for. You'd be renting. Actually, you don't even have to be renting. You could be on a social program and, afford your property taxes that way.
Well,
I'm talking disability or something
I
like
see
that.
What you mean. Well, I think we should get rid of property taxes. I think we should still pay for education. I think we should offset it with some sort of sales tax. I think most taxes should come from sales. Because, if I don't want to buy something, I don't have to in many cases. I mean, if you wanted to be like a very Amish lifestyle, you could do that. But yeah, that was my whole thing. I realized that at the end of the day, if you wanted to go completely off grid, you cannot in this country because of property taxes, and that was what changed my opinion on them. Also, viewers, that if we ever happen to have comment sections and stuff like that, if you want to sway me back over with good arguments, feel free, because again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to, broaden your viewpoints. It's okay to change your mind with presented to new information. You don't have to be locked into a side. Sway me back over to property taxes. Maybe there's a reason
okay
that
to have a.
Maybe there's
it's okay to have a conversation with somebody who has the opposite political viewpoints.
Yeah, it's maybe there is things I'm not seeing. Maybe there's things I'm not seeing. Maybe there's that's the whole purpose of this in a nutshell, is looking at things from different angles. I don't want to be right for the sake of being right and just to prove my side's right. I want to be right because it's right. If the conservatives have a better idea than me, then by all means we should go for it. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot just to prove Trump wrong. That's kind of where we're at in this world. I think is just in general is people would rather their side win and be wrong than acknowledge the other side may be right on something.
Yes. And, as a Republican, moderate Republican, I agree 100%. Do I think everything that Trump is doing is great and everything nationally Republicans are doing is great? No.
You fucking doing a communist. Lot of stupid. You communist piece of shit.
Some of this Epstein file stuff, a little shady. Definitely something going on. Who are you protecting? Trump going out on the world stage and trying to set off nukes just to get a deal. Maybe not the best ploy. Apparently it's somehow working with, especially in relation to Greenland and stuff. Maybe he's getting something he wants out of it, but probably best not to piss off all of our allies. We talked about NATO and them paying their fair share, but at the same time, nonetheless, it is an alliance. And, we should be using alternative motives to push our allies rather than pushing them to the brink of thinking they might have to fight a war with us.
Or
they've already shit their pants enough. Let's not scare them any more than they're already scared.
Well, or even, I'm not even worried about a war. At the end of the day, we'll show the Europeans why they have free health care.
The media.
But my thing is more, look at Canada. We're pushing them to China.
Yeah.
They don't think that we're a reliable trade partner, so they're looking at our biggest op and saying, well, maybe you're more reliable. And I think that's, bad negotiating tactics. I think that's the risk you take when you start alienating your allies, as you start pushing them towards your enemies.
Yeah, and maybe what he's doing isn't necessarily the best way of going about it. Obviously, you heard my opinion about the Canadians and them being childish, but at the same time, nonetheless, we are threatening them and we are pushing them. It could have been a civil discussion that escalated slowly over time. Maybe it wouldn't have gotten to this level, rather than
I'm
just throwing a bat at a glass window.
I'm also curious, like, what the conversations from Canada were like behind the scenes, like in this hypothetical world where America is threatening to militarily take Greenland, and the Danes are talking about Article 5 and that. If I'm Canada, I'm probably looking at them going, hey, for the record, we're voting no on that because if the Americans take Greenland, they have a navy and you guys have to cross an ocean to get here, so we're going to be on our own fighting America. Yeah, that we're not doing that. Good luck, guys. Sorry, Greenland. Canada is not standing with you. I'm curious if those conversations were going on behind the scenes, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that.
Supposedly, the Canadians were, well, obviously they're not secret, but they were drawing up like little secret contingency plans of hypothetically the United States invaded from the south. And they said Canada would be overran within hours, and they would have to fall back to their northern fortresses. And it was essentially like we'd be fighting between boulders because we wouldn't have the air, we wouldn't have the water, we would have very little control over the land. The only reason why the Americans wouldn't kill us militarily would be it'd be an inconvenience to chase you up in the snow.
We'll just starve them out. Listen, I love Canadians. Me and you, we both have two Canadian friends.
Absolutely.
One of which is in the Canadian Army. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. I love our Canadian friends. With that being said, I play a lot of games with my Canadian friend who's in the Army. They seem to have a lot of free time. They don't seem to be, nothing against him or his qualifications. He would probably whoop my ass in any sort of confrontation. However, I have zero faith in the Canadian military to be able to take on the American military. Again, another group, to kind of tie this all back together to the beginning of this conversation, another group that has existed has been existing under the protection of the American umbrella for 80 years and has not had to worry about their own defense because they know at the end of the day, they like to say they're not the diet version of America, they're not the 51st state, they're a separate group, but at the end of the day, if anybody threatened Canada, they've got to go through the United States. And Canada is well aware of that. And Canada is going to happily exist in that ecosystem just like Britain is, just like Germany is. But to that point, I mean, when we start pushing them away, we see what happens. They start going to China.
Yeah. I mean, best of luck to you if that's your strategy. Bold move, Cotton.
Let's see how it plays out when you're depending on another superpower to benevolently let you exist. I think part of this problem is, before we wrap up this episode, I think part of the problem is, I was thinking about this recently, the Europeans and the Canadians and all of these people have always, for 80 years, they've looked at, well, America's going to save us. If push comes to shove, America's going to save us. America's going to have our backs. America's eternally going to be the good guy. I don't think they ever envisioned a world where America might not be the good guy. Or America might sit there and say, hey, our interests don't necessarily align anymore. We're going to kind of go at it on our own. Good luck, in all your future endeavors.
Yeah.
And I think they're starting to slowly realize, like, hey, there may come a future where America doesn't necessarily give a shit what happens to Europe. America doesn't necessarily want to waste trillions of dollars in defending Europe. And I think that's a hard pill for the Europeans to swallow, especially in such a short amount of time. I mean, think a year and a half ago, these conversations weren't happening. Now we're, in the span of a year and a half, we went from, we will defend every sovereign inch of NATO with the full might of the American military to, hey, we're going to potentially send the Marines to Greenland, you know. This was, I think, a hard pill for them to swallow.
I think they're also grappling with, to your point, the fact that they're no longer the center of the world. Geopolitically, right? They're kind of irrelevant to a lot of things that are going on in the world, right? The Middle East, Asia, Americas.
Well, have they been relevant in that regard for the last 30 years? I mean, since this collapse of the Soviet Union, I mean, the U.S. has mostly been focused on the
only
Middle
thing
East.
Of any importance is going on is Ukraine. And
even that's kind of like a sideshow at the moment for bigger geopolitical things.
It's kind of
not to disrespect Ukraine in its own right, but I mean,
it's a stalemate militarily. It's kind of a stalemate right now, and it's like Trump is all but kind of like, hey, look, I'm, clearly he's still involved, but he's like, hey, as the president of the United States, I got bigger fish to fry, and this isn't for the Europeans. This is clearly on the back of your mind, but not for me. What is it? What's it have to do with the United States?
Yeah, how does it? It's not a NATO partner. Sure, they want to be NATO, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're not. How does this benefit the United States sending billions and billions of dollars? And for the record, I support Ukraine. I think we should be sending those billions and billions of dollars. But from Trump's point of view, I do understand where he's like, hey, that sounds like a you guys problem, not a me problem.
Yeah.
I've got to worry about
like
building a golden dome.
Not mine.
Yeah.
I got to worry about kidnapping. I mean,
kidnapping dictators in the Western Hemisphere.
Pulling them out of their bed in a Nike tracksuit in the middle of the night.
Meanwhile, they've somehow got a Nike tracksuit. Meanwhile, the rest of their population is starving. But on that note, I think this is a good spot for the end of the episode. So tune in for the next one, ladies and gents, and whatever you may or may not identify as.
Remember, escape the echo chamber.
Oh, that was corny. Okay, bye.